In this essay, we will explore crime, gender, and social networks as they present themselves in Baz Luhrmann's 2013 adaptation of The Great Gatsby and the original 1932 Scarface directed by Howard Hawks. Both these films provide an interesting look into cultural ideas surrounding organized crime during Prohibition. And while Gatsby may have been published in 1925, the enduring interest in this era and its relevance in American pop culture is made clear in Baz Luhrmann's adaptation. So let's jump in with Gatsby.
I still haven't met Mr. Gatsby.
No one's met him. They say he's third cousin to the Kaiser and second cousin to the devil.
I'm afraid I haven't been a very good host, old sport. You see, I'm Gatsby.
He's rich now. How do you get to here from here?
His parents were dirt poor farmers.
Well, Gatsby primarily uses two types of capital, social capital and cultural capital. Both of these terms are derived from Pierre Bourdieu. Social capital is about one's connections to other people and through them resources. In some ways this can translate to opportunities, while cultural capital is about having the correct markers of culture. This can be objectified in an object, like a degree from a university, or embodied in mannerisms and speech. Gatsby's cultural lessons come courtesy of Dan Cody, a rich man he rescued at sea and spent many years living with. Gatsby hoped to inherit Cody's money, but ended up with nothing. Well, not nothing. He learned a valuable skill set that translated into an upper-class presentation.
What the hell are you doing, old sport?
Thereby gaining cultural capital, but he was still very poor and without a future. After his time in the army, Gatsby meets a man named Meyer Wolfsheim, and that's where his future begins. Wolfsheim is a gangster,
My boy!
or as Gatsby would say,
He's a gambler. He's the man who fixed the 1919 World Series.
Fixed it.
Fixed it.
Well, how do you manage that?
Saw the opportunity, I suppose.
the key here is Gatsby says Wolfsheim saw the opportunity. Those opportunities can be understood as social capital. Opportunities are not distributed equally, and Wolfsheim was able to fix the game because of his social network. Ronald S. Burt, in a network analysis piece, finds that the best networks are those that bridge structural holes, i.e. those networks that can connect many different or disparate social groups. Burt would even consider brokerage opportunities between groups that one's network provides as a way to more concretely measure social capital.
Take care of my friend.
In a later piece, Burt studies the networks of managers at a corporation. He calculated whether or not they were promoted early or late based on the other managers. Burt finds that men who build networks that are flat and span structural holes are more likely to be promoted earlier, but this network path does not lead to success for everyone. He finds that those who borrow social capital from a sponsor with a hierarchical network have a much quicker route to promotions than women or entry-rank men who don't. Gatsby does exactly this. He stands out as an ambitious man with cultural capital and is thus able to befriend a sponsor, Meyer Wolfsheim, to borrow social capital. It's through Wolfsheim's social capital that Gatsby is able to rise up and become a prominent leader of a bootlegging organization. However, Gatsby seems to be able to run most of the organization from afar, while Scarface's Tony takes a more hands-on approach. Tony elects to steal the social capital of his sponsor and boss, Johnny Lovo. Tony kills his previous boss, Big Louie Castillo, his Southside mob boss, in order to enter into Lovo's criminal network.
Hey, Tony, it's a bonus.
In the film, Big Louie is a roughly translated version of real-life gangster Big Jim Colosimo. Johnny Lovo is the Johnny Torrio character, and despite screenwriter Ben Hecht's protestation when Al Capone apparently sent two men to check on the film, the titular Scarface is derived from Chicago's very own scarred gangster, Al Capone. In reality, Johnny Torrio retired and peacefully handed his business over to Capone. Using Burt again, this would support the idea of borrowing social capital in order to rise up. In the film, Tony starts a mob war with the North Side Irish gang. He steals Lobo's position at the top and all his contacts. He also, quote-unquote, steals his girlfriend Poppy. To be clear, Poppy makes a choice to trade up from Lobo to Tony as she sees how successful he is. Whether this stealing social capital method would work out in Burt's model is unclear.
All right, go on.
But what is clear is that Gatsby and Tony both do use the social capital of others in order to enter leadership positions. So if Gatsby and in some ways Tony are using a method of advancement Burt primarily finds optimal for women, then where are the women in these criminal organizations? And of these films? Basically, we end up with 6 women between the 2 films. Daisy, the great love interest of Gatsby's life and also Tom's wife, Jordan, Nick's default partner, Myrtle, Tom's mistress, Poppy, Tony's love interest, Cheska, Tony's sister, and Mrs. Camonte, Tony's disapproving mother. Basically, all the women in these films are connected to crime through their families or romantic partners. Chris Smith, in her book about women in crime at the turn of the century, finds this mostly to be true during Prohibition, but not so in the earlier Progressive era. Smith introduces that these multiplex relationships perhaps became more important during Prohibition, in part due to the need for greater trust. Although later we will discuss how both films discourage trusting women. But let's start by focusing on some of the ways that women act in gangs.
Dana Peterson et al.'s analysis on the gender composition of gangs finds that women within majority male gangs are often granted greater freedom in choosing gang activities due to male members feeling little status threat. In this case, Poppy was never constrained or forced into gang activities. Rather, Poppy had plenty of freedom to the point where Tony even helped her escape from the police so she could avoid conflict. Furthermore, a study by Joe and Chesney-Lind find that gangs tend to be ethnically organized and violence is a major activity amongst boys in gangs. However, in contrast, girls do not typically engage in violent activities, suggesting that it is not celebrated or normative for girls in gangs. Miller and Decker's study on young women and gang violence argues that women who experience gang victimization were not the intended targets. Miller and Decker suggest 3 reasons for explaining this. 1, they are in the wrong place at the wrong time and associated with the wrong people. 2, they are unintended targets and were caught within gunfire by rival gang shootings. And 3, the association of males who have greater likelihood to be intended targets increases the chance of victimization. An alternate study by Lee H. Bowker on female participation in delinquency reinforces the theory of women being excluded from crime. Bowker finds that female members were often excluded and rarely involved in the planning of male delinquent activities. Also, girls in the study at times passively participated in gang activities by being a bystander or holding weapons for other members. An example of Poppy's exclusion from gang violence and her passive participation can be seen when Tony and his men prepare to go on a hit after surviving a shootout from a rival gang. In this scene, Poppy is loading a gun and seems to be preparing to join them. However, when the men begin to leave,
Hey, Tony!
Poppy does not,
Take this along in case that bean shooter doesn't work.
Okay.
and instead hands Tony a gun.
Joe, Laidler, and Hunt find that female gang members are often held to a higher standard of femininity that contradicts with lived realities, to be, quote, a good girl. When women can't meet these expectations, they, in turn, can be met with violence. This feminine standard involves domestic tasks, but it also involves controlling who the women hang out with, their drinking, drug use, if they're going out, and if they're flirting with guys. Here, Tony acts similar to the men described in the study. He's trying to control where Seska goes, and especially who she flirts with. When she goes against Tony's wishes, he uses violence against her.
You'll be sorry for this.
Next time I catch you in a place like that again, I'll kill you.
You're telling me what to do. I'll do what I want, same as you, understand?
You listen to me.
I hate you.
Never mind what I do. That's all right. But you're gonna stay home, understand?
I'm no baby. I can take care of myself.
Yeah, running around with fellas, huh? Letting them hold you like that. Letting them look at you. Dressing up like that for fellas to see, huh?
What I'm doing, fellas, is my business.
In The Great Gatsby, Tom is the one who enacts violence against women. He's not gang affiliated, which Aloha et al. Suggest can be linked to a greater likelihood to experience intimate partner violence.
Daisy, Daisy, Daisy! Got no right! Speak her name! Speak her name when Oh my God, you are crazy!
In a review of the literature, Capaldi et al. Find that the estimated rate of physical intimate partner violence for all U.S. couples to range from 17 to 39%, and that the rates are relatively similar between men and women, if not slightly higher for women. In the book, Tom breaks Myrtle's nose, but in the film it's not so clear. Despite the graphic nature of film, you might even say that the domestic violence is toned down. The attack takes place in a wide shot, the camera quickly retreating away from the violence and the aftermath. The slow motion here creates a note of unreality and myth. It's not about Myrtle or the act itself, it's about what that violence symbolizes about Tom. However, this shy gaze is not extended to Myrtle's death. Once she dies, she's translated from a person into a pure object and metaphor, a grotesque spectacle that is repeated for the audience multiple times on screen. The Great Gatsby seems to be asking, who are the real criminals? And uses the bodies of women to suggest the answer. Scarface also uses women to craft Tony's story and revel in his depravity. When it comes time for the film to end, his death is brought about by Cheska, who, moreover, brought about the death of Ronaldo when Tony killed him for dating his sister.
Tony, don't! Tony!
Cheska seeks revenge for this murder, but becomes too emotional to carry out the task. In the process, she accidentally leads the cops right to Tony.
Don't let me follow me. It's my fault. I shouldn't have come.
The police shoot through the windows, killing her, thus making Tony a man who has truly lost everything.
Please, come back here! Come back, I say!
Just in time for him to die a martyr.
Gatsby's. I know Mr. Gatsby will be very happy that you've called.
Gatsby dies because of Daisy. She was the true driver of the car, but convinces a willing Gatsby to take the blame. When Myrtle's husband Wilson demands revenge, Tom tells him it was Gatsby. In contrast to the earlier mentioned Joe and Chesney-Lind study, Gatsby is a non-violent male gang member. As such, he gets a soft, tragic, and dignified death, while the abuse of Myrtle and her death are used as illustrations on others' character. Tom, an aggressive criminal brute, despite or perhaps because of his old money, while Daisy becomes the face of the vile, rich upper class of capitalists. When she elects to stay with Tom and leave Gatsby, her uncaring nature challenges the faith and trust he placed in her. These romantic deaths show the ways men are privileged in these films outside of the gendered realities within organized crime. Both display moments of consensus with the literature, but are ultimately more concerned with reaffirming cultural narratives of powerful men that are led to their ruination by the women in their lives.